Hi, everyone. I'm really excited that you could join us for another session as part of our fellowship program this year. I'm really excited to have Tytti Kaasinen from the Global Alliance on Banking Values coming to talk to us today. And she'll tell us a little bit more about her background, but I'd love to highlight that this is a really great opportunity for you to ask some questions and engage with Tytti on her career path and a bit of the work that she's done. Because as I was going back through your background, Tytti, I realized how you've been working in engagement and with companies for quite a few years now, working with GES before and then with Sustainalytics. So that was probably after they were purchased, I'm guessing. You can tell
Exactly.
us
Yeah.
a bit about that, as Sustainalytics is an organization that many people in the room should know about. But right now, you're working at UNICEF with their child rights issues, but also with the Global Alliance on Banking Values, which is an amazing organization. I think that all of you should learn more about and see the work of the different members of the alliance that they're helping to create impact all over the world. And it might be in a few of your own countries. So, Tytti, how about I hand it over to you and we'll have plenty of time for conversation throughout this hour together.
Perfect. Thank you. I can share my presentation as well. I think I am allowed. I have lots of slides, so I might run through some of them quite quickly, but I wanted to make sure that you have the material so you can look at them later on as well. And my mouse has just stopped working, so that's always nice when that happens at the worst times. But here we go. I just want to get to the beginning of this presentation and it's not letting me. So bear with me. Let's stop sharing and try and see if I can move myself there. This is odd. It is nice that we are recording my random ramblings, so so people can hear that things don't always work out perfectly. Okay, let me bring it up again and see if that works. But maybe in the meantime, as I'm trying to open my presentation, I can talk about my background, as Steve said. Yes, so I worked, my background is in responsible investment, specifically on the institutional investor side, although my academic background is in international relations. So I don't have an economics or business background, but I studied politics and international relations in Manchester University in England. And that's also where I started my career. I kind of half accidentally ended up with finance when I was studying all those years ago. I didn't even know that responsible or sustainable finance existed. But I ended up starting as a responsible investment analyst at the Cooperative Asset Management in Manchester, which is very much a values-based bank. Then I'm on that path still in a way. So I worked there for a few years after university, and then I relocated to Sweden to join GES, which was a particularly engagement, but also ESG research provider that was then taken over by Sustainalytics a few years later. And of course, Sustainalytics has since been taken over by Morningstar. So that seems to be a kind of a common trend in the ESG service provider field. But I was still there in the Morningstar times as well. But at GES and Sustainalytics, I was altogether for about 10 years. And as Stephen said, I was working on engagement and active ownership and stewardship for and with institutional investors. And specifically, I was responsible for GES and Sustainalytics whole service of proactive engagement projects, which was about developing collaborative engagement projects focusing on a whole range of ESG or sustainability challenges that were emerging or intensifying. So rather than just reacting to when things go wrong or scandals surface, really looking at proactively what kind of challenges companies and investors should be preparing for and trying to mitigate and really encourage a more positive trajectory. And then I I had a short stint at S&P Global Ratings as well. Specifically, you might know S&P Global Ratings from the credit side, particularly as a service provider there. And there I was working with ESG investors and really trying to improve the connection between ESG investors and the ratings part of S&P to really try and enhance the ratings parts, integration of investor needs, sustainable investor needs, and vice versa. And then most recently, before joining the GABV, I worked at the Council on Ethics of the Swedish National Pension Funds. So after having worked as an asset manager and service providers, I then moved to asset owner as well to complete the cycle on the investment side. And at the Council on Ethics of the AP funds, I worked as an engagement director, specifically coordinating their international dialogues with companies, but also collaborations and joint advocacy activities together with other investors and other stakeholders as well. So that definitely has been a kind of red thread throughout my career. I'm an ESG generalist, so I've always been working on issues across the board and very much in a collaborative, focused on change kind of way. So in that sense, GABV is not really an anomaly. It's in a way a natural continuation to my career. And I guess this, what we say at GABV, finance at the service of people and the planet, it kind of also describes my career. This is what I've been really focusing on. And the reason why I wanted to join GABV, well, there were many reasons, but one of them was that GABV really, and banks generally, are really at the front line. And I wanted to come closer to the real economy, real communities, real transactions, and real projects being financed, or real people having access to money to be able to live their lives. Whereas in the investment side, a lot of it happens in the kind of financial economy and it's money changing hands, even though my role was really much about direct dialogues with companies to encourage change. But I still feel like banks are more closer to the real impact that can be made and really crucial part of any community. So enough about me, I think, but very happy to answer questions about my background. As Stephen said, I have a little bit of an maybe unconventional situation that I divide my time between two jobs. So I work at GABV 60% or 3 days a week, and then I have another employment at UNICEF Sweden, where I specifically work in the kind of program and advocacy department, where I specifically encourage and help investors to integrate children's rights in their investment processes and analysis. So I don't work on fundraising, but specifically more on a kind of corporate advocacy side in trying to get investors to realize and support child-related risks and opportunities. So I'm a little bit all over the place, which is how I like it. But today I'm firmly with my GABV hat on, but you're happy to answer any questions about anything else at the end of the presentation or separately. But what I wanted to talk to you about today, I'll start with the history of GABV, how we came about and what we are today. And as I said, I have lots of slides, so I might rush through some of them just kind of quite superficially. But I do want to make sure that I really spend extra time on the principles of values-based banking, because I think that's really what sets us apart. And I know that you've had a fantastic program of sessions. I kind of want to join all of them myself after seeing your curriculum. But I really wanted to focus on this part because I think that's what's different and what makes us special in the financial system. Then obviously I'll also explain what we do, and I also included slides on our members. They're not completely updated slides, but as of last year, so you can also see if you recognize some banks in your countries or your areas that kind of pique your interest or you might want to look into more closely. And yeah, very excited to be talking to you. I think you guys have such interesting backgrounds, but I hope to be able to give you something new maybe to think about. But please feel free to interrupt me at any point. No need to wait until the end. I will make sure that there's enough time for discussion at the end as well, but don't hesitate to interrupt me, I don't see you raising your hand, just interrupt me, speak up. No worries, I'm really not offended. So please go ahead. So in terms of how it all started, most of you are probably too young to remember the financial crisis 2007, 2008, but that really showed how the excessive risk-taking by financial institutions had been kind of on a kind of shaky ground, and the financial system seemed to be, well, it was obvious that financial system had become too large, too complex, and too remote from the real economy to really service the people and the environment in a meaningful way. And there had been lots of focus on short-term profit maximization, and really not thinking about the long-term needs and benefits of the people and the societies. And of course, that had and still continues to have lots of negative impacts on the people as well as on our planet. But of course, when there's a crisis, it's also a good opportunity to really take stock and assess what could be done differently, what are the alternatives, what we want to take the opportunity to fix or try to change. And indeed, there were a certain group of banks that had been really more values driven and had been already driving their operations in a way that was more attuned with the society's needs and environmental limitations. And that was, I don't know exactly how they found out to be about each other, but there were 10 banks at the time that then started calling themselves values-based banks, that then decided to form the Global Alliance for Banking on Values, or GABV, in 2009. And since then, the movement has been growing steadily, and now we are over 70 members all around the world. And as you can see here, we really are in all parts of the world. And this was one of the things that really attracted me to GABV, to really enable me to ensure that I'm not staying in my Nordic or European bubble, but really do get direct insights and learnings from all parts of the world, and really learn to better understand the realities and challenges and different ways of doing things in different kinds of environments. I think all our members have lots to learn from each other, and that's really what GABV is firmly built on, this peer learning, sharing, tackling joint challenges together. So this is what our map more or less looks like now. It might miss a few dots, but it gives you an idea of all the different places that members are present in any case. And it is just showing some numbers in terms of impact, but very much focused on the people side of things. We are very much acutely and actively working on other impact metrics as well. But in terms of this slide, we mean by impact in terms of what's our scale, if you like, in terms of the member banks, how many countries they are in, how many employees are therefore in this remit, and how many customers we are serving. And we also have a network of supporting and ecosystem partners where we share the values and have lots of synergies to leverage, because it's all about the systemic change. So neither our member banks or even the GABV as an alliance alone can do things. We really need to join forces with others and find allies, find others that have similar or parallel aims, that we can really work together and be more effective together. And at the core of GABV and all our banks is that banks are not just for moving money from one place to another, but they are really an integral part of the society with big impacts and dependencies, both in terms of people and the environment. And particularly now, perhaps potentially more than ever, with this kind of meta crisis or poly crisis and all these different things, threats and negative developments converging, there's such a big role that banks can play, both in terms of their respective communities and a local level, but also globally, to really try and pursue a more constructive, inclusive, positive trajectory in the face of all these problems that the world is facing. Really well-being of the people and the economy and the communities and the environment is at the core of what we believe in. And not just anyone can become a GABV member. We don't really have any big mainstream, well, we don't have any big mainstream banks as our members, they couldn't be. And if you look at the basic requirements on this slide, being a financial institution, regulated financial institution, and having at least 50 million US dollars in total assets is probably not so difficult for the big banks to meet. But what is special and really makes us want to make sure that the member banks are truly committed to the cause and really are built on the right values is that, first of all, there needs to be commitment from the CEO level. So when a new bank wants to become a GABV member, there needs to be kind of letter of intent or application from the CEO explicitly saying that he or she wants their organization to become a GABV member. And we also require the member banks to have an explicit values-based mission. So it's not enough just to be a general bank, which also has some sustainability or responsible activities as part of the operations, but really needs to be at the core of their mission and strategy. And besides those basic requirements, we then assess the candidates' performance and numbers in the areas that you see there on the right-hand side to really make sure that their concrete activities, policies, reporting, impacts are intentionally in line with values-based banking. So this is kind of the criteria that banks need to go through and meet before they can become GABV members. And as I said, our members aren't really big global banks, but they can look very different otherwise. They are relatively small in size, most of them, but we also have some quite sizable banks too. But our members include microfinance banks in emerging markets. There's lots of credit unions, community banks, mutuals, and also otherwise sustainable overarching banks that specifically finance social, environmental, and cultural activities. Some of them are very local, some can be regional, but typically they have a relatively limited focus instead of being global banks, which have kind of branches all over the place. I talked about the CEOs being at the core already, so I won't say more about that. But really, I'll keep coming back to that. That really it is the CEOs and their joint kind of peer learning and peer sharing that really is at the core of the GABV, and also the progress of the individual banks and GABV as the movement. And while GABV is a global alliance, as you can imagine, it's a very diverse alliance, given how broadly spread we are in terms of our footprint and how we have different types of financial institutions as our members. So to make sure that there's also opportunity for regional challenges to be effectively discussed and addressed, we have 5 regional chapters where CEOs and senior colleagues convene, not just exchanging information as and when, but they also we have regional face-to-face or in-person meetings for all of the regions to really enable them to dig deeper into what's particularly pressing or important or challenging in their respective regions. But the whole movement also meets annually in the annual meeting, and I'll also come back to that later. But really, the focus is to try and enable and facilitate a lot of sharing and learning discussions among our members in all different levels of the member banks. And part of that, we also have different communities of practice where kind of below the CEO and top management level, the practitioners in different areas of the organization can come together and jointly discuss their relevant topics. And the impact strategy community of practice is the one that I'm responsible for as the head of impact and research. And typical members there are heads of sustainability, people really working with impact or with communities, really hands-on looking at how the banks are playing a role in their respective communities or what their impact is, how to measure it, how to improve it. So that's my community of practice. And we have human development community of practice, where it's typically the human resources people from different organizations. And the idea there really is to to kind of help and facilitate and encourage the organizations to incorporate the values in their culture, but also to empower and kind of foster the people within the organizations to grow and kind of embody the values of values-based banking. And often it is people with their personal values in line with banking on values that come to these organizations. So it is also very important for the human development, human resources people to kind of leverage that passion and those capabilities in the individuals working in the organizations. And then we have marketing and communications community of practice, which I guess it's quite self-explanatory. It's where the marketing and communications people from respective member organizations and from the secretariat come together to really look at how we're able to tell the story, show to the world how values-based banks jointly and individually are driving change, having a good impact, how and why we are different from the mainstream banks, and good for the communities. Then we have the Governing Board Forum and the Leadership Academy. I'll come back to them a little bit more later as well. In the GABV Secretariat, I realized I don't have a slide on that, but we are, I think, 9 people working in the Secretariat, so including me, plus the 4 regional representatives and a couple of other people that work in different parts. So we are relatively small in terms of the central organization. The members are really the stars of the whole thing, and we in the Secretariat are just kind of facilitators, helping them to get together and enhancing the learning and the channels that they have for working together. And then we come to the principles of values-based banking. But maybe I'll pause for a second to just give you an opportunity to interrupt me without interrupting me, and see if anyone has any comments or questions at this stage.
Yeah, Tytti, we had a good question from Juliet in the chat about balancing profit motives with long-term social and environmental impacts. And so I think that could be something that kind of ties into these principles that you're about to talk about. But yeah, how does that sort of, I mean, a bank still needs to make its margins, a bank still needs to run a business. So that might be something to talk about also from your personal perspective. And then if there's any other questions from the group, please feel free to speak up now.
Perfect. Yes, I can see that question, and I will actually come to that. I can see Francois has his hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I've got a short question. So we know that in Europe, as of next year, there are going to be some new sustainability requirements in the context of CSRD and new taxonomy and the like. We know that to get into your movement, we need to go further than the norm. So my question would be, in the context of Europe, do you expect to strengthen the requirements in order to keep the exclusivity of your organization?
Yeah, good question. And I think basically the answer is no, because we do need to also make sure that expectations are not unrealistic for banks in other markets. We really want to make sure that we can bring banks, all kinds of truly, as long as they're truly values-based banks, to come and join the GABV. However, of course, the regulation and generally, I think the increasing talk about sustainability and ESG among the mainstream banks is in a way a threat to GABV, because it kind of dilutes, because all the banks are now talking about how sustainable and values-based they are. So one of actually my key roles as head of impact and research is to also look at research that we can commission or conduct to really show what is the difference, how values-based banks are more truly sustainable and inclusive than the mainstream banks, particularly when now the regulations are requiring more and more banks to do certain things. So this is a challenge for us. How can we continue showing that we are leading the way when everyone is talking about the same things? And this is something that we talk a lot about actually within the movement. But yeah, no, we are not going to be increasing the right kind of increasing the criteria in that sense. They are already quite strict, and they look at also areas like the triple bottom line and the real economy connection, which isn't really part of the regulation. And I'll come back to that, but I think it would be still impossible for the mainstream banks to become our members, even if they meet the new regulation, because they are not completely focused on the kind of real economy and triple bottom line activities. I hope that answers your question at least partly. Juliet, go on, Francois, do you want to follow up?
Yeah, but it would feel bad to steal Juliet's spot. She waited for that, so I'm going to have a question after that.
Juliet, go ahead.
Yeah, coming from a country in West Africa, Sierra Leone, I would want to know, because in Sierra Leone we have lots of traditional banks. So I'm curious to know what steps can traditional banks take to transition towards a more value-driven approach? And what are some of the challenges they might face in this transition process? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we do have, I think we have about 5 members in Africa, and this is very much on their agenda as well, not only in Africa, but otherwise as well. I think it depends on the type of the bank. I think many local banks are already quite nicely aligned with the values-based bank, because they are often community focused. They really do focus on the needs of the people in their immediate vicinity, whereas there are often global banks that are present in many countries, including in Africa, which maybe operate a little bit differently. So again, it's a challenge for the smaller local banks. How can they compete in that environment and really show why they are better for the community and more aligned with the real needs and maybe traditions even of their respective markets. I'll come back to this maybe a little bit more later. We do have a scorecard which is open for all banks. We assess our members against the scorecards annually, but it is also open to any bank to look at and use. So if there's a traditional bank which maybe isn't yet in the kind of GABV warm embrace, maybe a good starting point for them would be to look at the scorecard which is available, and kind of that will give them some ideas of what we specifically look for, both in terms of qualitative but also quantitative indicators from banks that really are holistically in line with values-based banking. But otherwise, it can look very different from bank to bank. So this is a bit of an overarching response, but also different banks maybe have different priorities and different focus in the operations. And then for them, the path to becoming a GABV member, for example, might look a little bit different.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Anyone else wanted to follow up at this stage?
Maybe one last question on my part, for the moment at least.
Yeah.
So we know that EU regulation have a tendency to trickle down to other markets and to other companies which are outside of Europe. Do you expect that smaller banks, which are more your target, as far as I understand, are going to find it easier due to EU regulation to join your organization and to put sustainability forward better?
Yeah, maybe. And I think not only because of EU regulation, but I think generally as well, there's a lot more focus on the role of the banks in sustainability, what they are financing, how they are financing, particularly in terms of the climate, of course, but also otherwise there's also social taxonomy, social expectations emerging, which I personally really appreciate. That it's not only about climate, but this holistic well-being of our societies and economy. So I think the general tendency of increasing scrutiny of banks' sustainability and kind of integrity and governance is helpful. Yeah, I think maybe because there's also obviously many smaller banks are often also closely working with kind of International Monetary Fund and other international banks. So if this kind of expectations of banks being able to demonstrate their sustainability takes even more foothold also on those levels, that by necessity will mean that smaller banks will have to improve their transparency, for example, or kind of measurement of their impacts. And of course, that is then a big step towards meeting the GABV standards as well. But yeah, hopefully, because we would like to have more members, because together we can do much more and really start taking big steps towards transforming the whole system. And I will come to the question regarding the profits a little bit later. So noted, and yeah, coming to that. So in terms of principles of values-based banking, so here you can see the 5 principles, and then culture in the middle, that really where everything is tied into and based on. And yeah, I will just go through them all one by one. I won't stay more on this slide because I'll come back to all of them now. So starting with the triple bottom line. So this is actually now answering the question from the chat. So of course, in order to be a viable, stable bank, both for the sake of your employees, but also for the sake of your clients, there is an expectation for the banks to be working kind of operationally in a good way, and that often involves and includes generating reasonable profit. So it's not like our member banks can't make profits. Definitely not. Even some of our member banks are actually listed banks, and they are sometimes in a bit of a tricky situation because their stakeholders and shareholders might have certain expectations. But yeah, making profit is not forbidden. It is totally allowed. The key is that making profit is not the main objective of the values-based bank. Instead, the business model is focused on the social and environmental impacts and needs. And when we talk about the kind of triple bottom line, we talk about people, planet, and prosperity. So we don't talk about people, planet, and profit, but we talk about prosperity, which is reflecting the fact that sometimes enough is enough. It's not like always more and more and more should be the key, particularly because the planetary boundaries just won't allow it. But people, planet, and prosperity of the bank's clients, particularly both in terms of corporate clients and individual clients, to be able to live their lives in a sustainable, fulfilling way, and basically well-being, to be able to be financed. So money is not bad, definitely not bad or forbidden in itself. It's just what you do with that money. And often banks invest some of their profits back into the business, of course, or they might have foundations or philanthropic arms where they give away or some of the profits that they make year to year. So there's different ways of dealing with profit. But triple bottom line, having the social and environmental issues at the core is kind of one of the key principles of values-based banks. The second principle, I don't think these are in particular order, but the second one that I mentioned here is the real economy connection. And the idea here really is that it's not just about money moving from one place to another without the banks even knowing who's the ultimate beneficiary or the source of the money. But really, we expect the banks to have mostly and ideally just one degree of separation between them and the client or source of the money. But really knowing, having more visibility and transparency into where the money is coming from, where it's going to, and focusing on the actual needs of people and businesses in the real economy or in their communities, not kind of speculatively investing money somewhere in kind of intangible, far away derivatives or whatever. Again, this is not completely forbidden, but the expectation is that the values-based banks are definitely largely focused on real economy and delivering social, environmental, and financial returns, kind of in that order, in connection to the real world. The third principle is being client-centered, and the idea here is that the values-based banks and their clients, by knowing each other, is mutually beneficial. and having kind of long-term perspective and deeper understanding of the clients is also better for the bank's risk management. And really understanding what are the needs of the individual clients or in the community helps the banks to also better serve and anticipate the needs and also kind of mitigate the risks that might be particularly pertinent in their operating environment. So really this focus on the client and kind of knowing your client is one of the key principles as well. And the idea there is that through financing clients in a sustainable way, and maybe sustainability projects in a local level, or for example in SMEs, which in some countries are maybe struggling to get finance sometimes, or disadvantaged communities. Some of our members also focus specifically on marginalized communities. Through financing and giving kind of providing access to finance for those actors, they can help them to then in turn becoming more sustainable or values-based. So there's the kind of trickle effect from the bank through its financing in the real economy and the banks that they know about to kind of expand their impact outwards as well. The fourth principle is again going back to a little bit about the profits in a way, or otherwise being a financially viable organization. We do expect banks to act responsibly and have a strong governance in order to really make sure that they can continue their operations, that there aren't unnecessary disruptions to their operations, which would be really harmful for everyone involved. Of course, there's no way to completely avoid external disruptions, particularly big ones that are happening in the society, but we do expect banks to really have this long-term resilience-focused approach to their operations as well. So this isn't just about what they do outwards, but really making sure that they have a robust governance and operations looking internally as well. And fifth value is transparency and kind of diversity and inclusion. And one of the ideas here is that this bank shouldn't really have anything to hide. They can and should be transparent in terms of how they are governing things, how they act, what they finance, and they should be reflected in their reporting. And this is also something where there's sometimes a big difference compared to the conventional banks, whose reporting or kind of financial structures might be very complex and harder to really get to the bottom of. Whereas with values-based banks, we hope and aim for their communication and reporting to be really be able to be used to hold them accountable, really show their integrity, and to be really accessible to all kinds of stakeholders. And the banks are really expected to engage with the communities, engage with the different stakeholders within their sphere of influence, and then taking that feedback, taking those insights from their stakeholders into how they actually run the business. So we really expect kind of engagement, open communication, transparency in all directions. We really feel like that's the best way to create trust in these long-term stable relationships and kind of tackling the shared challenges that we have. And then finally, the culture, which is the basis for all of these principles. And here the human resources also comes in. It should kind of, these things should run from the CEO to kind of frontline operational people to make sure that the values that the bank has committed to through GABV membership or otherwise through committing to social and environmental causes is really lived and embodied by all the employees. Of course, training and education comes into the picture there, and engagement and kind of empowerment of the staff. Employees to also play a part in how the company operates. Just going to check the time. Yeah, okay. So here I'm moving on to what we do. And I included here our kind of slogan or main mission, which is about changing finance and financing change, which I think is a perfect summary of what we do. So we are trying to change the system, there's the financial sector broadly, but also our individual banks are directly financing change in terms of social, cultural, environmental projects on a local level, and really bringing a more inclusive group of stakeholders into the financial remit as well. I have to be a little bit careful with the time, so I might not go into detail with all of this, but these are kind of 6 areas where we are trying to really drive systemic change, both in terms of facilitating and strengthening our individual members to then be able to act more sustainably and have more impact through their individual operations, but also to strengthen GABV and Global Alliance for Banking and Values and values-based banking as a whole, as a movement, to really get us more space in the debate and really highlight and get more visibility into these different ways of doing things, and why is it better for the society and for the future compared to conventional banks. So kind of visibility, scaling up both in terms of impact and membership, in order to try and hopefully inspire and ultimately change the whole financial system to be more in line with the societal and environmental values. I'll briefly go through these 6 areas of our activities. Setting the standard, I touched on this a little bit earlier. So we have the scorecard, which all members fill in every year. That's very important for the integrity of the movement and accountability. So when you are a member, you need to kind of show every year that you are living the values. And as I said, this scorecard can be used by any bank, also our non-members, to really use maybe as a benchmarking or get some ideas of where the gaps might be that they could improve to get more in line with this holistic thinking of the real economy and triple bottom line and kind of all-round sustainable operations. So there's more both quantitative and qualitative elements here. As you can see, financial viability is important, but there's also lots about the kind of how the culture and strategy and also the actual assets are used to support sustainable and kind of inclusive aims. Leadership development and really building the leaders of the future in the financial side. I think that might particularly resonate with you guys. There's different ways that we within the GABV Alliance and community are really trying to empower and inspire and support people working in this field. I've talked quite a lot about the CEOs who can share with each other, get kind of peer support, get ideas from different organizations, different parts of the world, or the same part of the world. It is very much a pre-competitive environment. I don't think any of our members really consider each other competitors to try and kind of elbow out of the way, even if they operate in the same markets. There's really a lot of mutual support and learning to be gained from everyone and for everyone, for mutual benefits. Then we have the communities of practice, which I mentioned earlier, where the practitioners in different parts of the organizations can really come together with peers from different parts of the world to really harness the knowledge and discuss their shared challenges together. Then we have the Leadership Academy, which is intended for mid to senior level managers at values-based banks. And there I think you had the session with Katrin, what's her name, from MIT previously?
Yeah, Katrin Koffer.
That's it. Yeah, she's involved she's kind of one of the coordinators of the GABV Leadership Academy. So there's a nice link there as well. So if you liked her speech, you know a little bit about what kind of values and ideas the Leadership Academy also incorporates. And then we have a Governance Academy as well, which is relatively new. That's intended for non-executive directors in our banks to really support the boards kind of behind or below or beside the CEO, to also really understand and advocate for the values. This is important, not least because the CEOs can change. So if you have one CEO that's committed their bank to the GABV and certain values, if that CEO changes, it's important there's this continuity and really integration in the whole organization. So it's not just relying on that one person wanting to live in line with the values, but it really is embodied throughout the whole organization, from practitioners to mid-level managers to the board as well. So this is part of our thinking here, is really make sure that all parts of the organization are enabled to learn and be inspired even further. Leadership Academy, I think I probably can't say too much about that because of time, but I included a link on this slide as well, so you can read more on this on the website. But this is really a way to both enable people to go through this program, and then there's the alumni network. I think we've had 9 rounds of the Leadership Academy so far. So once you've been through the program, you can continue kind of sharing with the others that have been through the program to continue learning and support each other. Annual meeting, as I said, we have annually, and we just had our this year's one in Italy a couple of weeks ago, and it was my first. I joined GABV in the beginning of January. I forgot to say that earlier, so I'm fairly new at GABV. But it was so nice to be able to get together and really feel that it is what it says on the tin. Everyone is so welcoming, everyone's really passionate, and everyone's really keen to speak to everyone and anyone. So it was a really nice atmosphere, and it really also is a testament to how it is valuable to see in person. There's so much more kind of dynamic and kind of understanding that can happen when we meet face to face. So that's lovely. I just wanted to kind of share a bit of personal feeling about how valuable it is to really gather all together once a year. Of course, one big thing of the GABV is addressing urgent challenges, and this here now has the example of climate action. But of course, we are not only about climate. There's lots of social activities and other environmental areas as well that we are looking at. But climate, I guess, naturally is where we have maybe most explicit initiatives. And we are also very closely involved with TCAF, the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials, which actually started as a GABV project, but we're really pleased how that has really gotten a strong foothold in the whole financial industry. So we are really hoping to replicate that maybe with some other areas where we can create standards that can then become the practice in the financial industry as a whole. We do lots of research, and not only to kind of blow our own trumpet and show why we are so great, but also to really find out what is working and what is not so working so well in the financial system or regulations when it comes to enabling banks to act sustainably and really support the needs of the community. So there's a lot more on our website. Again, there's a link there. You can look at the different articles and stories and position papers and research reports. I did want to, I forgot this one. I thought I was going to go to the next slide because I wanted to mention our most recent research, which was looking at the role of banks in peace and conflict. This report was just launched in connection to our annual meeting a couple of weeks ago. And I really recommend it because, as I'm sure no one can escape this, that war is really, really detrimental for all kinds of development aims and world stability, and to enable people to really work with sustainability without having to try and fight the destruction. So we carried out or supported research how values-based banks and banks in general play a role in supporting peace and trying to kind of rid us of conflict. And in connection to that, we also issued a Milan Declaration, which was really a statement for peace, where the GABV banks as a whole committed to really integrating the peace and disarmament principles in the operations, and not financing activities or companies that are adding to the conflict and war in the world. And we call for other banks to join us on this as well. Again, there's links in the slides for you to explore further. But this is one example where really we are trying to advocate for systemic change through advocacy and awareness and partnerships. And this definitely also includes partnering with mainstream banks. We are not kind of trying to be separate from them, but I think there's lots that they can hopefully take on board from us, and also for us to understand why the conventional banks have hesitations about becoming values-based bank, and hopefully find some common ground and really make the whole financial sector more sustainable overall. I think you've understood from my different examples already that GABV is all about enabling people to come together, both people within the movement, but also we love cooperating with others, universities, other like-minded organizations. I think you have Kai talking to you maybe this week already. He also is very closely involved in the GABV through his organization, Kai Locker. And generally, we really want to be aware of our role in the system and other players in the system, and how we can all work together in different ways and on different levels to really further positive change and systemic change in the sector and society. Well, I think I'm almost done. I'm not going to talk about these slides, but again, for your reference, and you can see the up-to-date situation on our website, but I did include the slides of all our different chapters, so you can look if you recognize any name from your countries or from your kind of near vicinity. And yeah, if you want to know more, you can subscribe to our e-sign. And there's lots of information on our website, and you'll also have my email address on this presentation if you didn't have it already. So don't hesitate to get in touch. But I will now stop sharing, and sorry that I took so long. Now we have 6 minutes, apologies, but I'm also happy to stay beyond the top of the hour, or happy to take any questions afterwards as well. So don't worry, but hopefully there was something interesting there for you. Happy to take any questions or thoughts. I'm gonna look at
Yeah, I have a question that is coming to mind already. Thank you so much for the chat. Definitely gonna have to reach out later because my work is fully involved in the same space you are, working in queer inclusive data that's gonna hit the global south. So we're definitely gonna need to chat more. But I guess I have a lot of thoughts swimming in my head right now, so this is not gonna be that cogent. But how do you source something like socially inclusive data for one, and then second, how do you translate that to implementation for capital when there are like social stigmas in that economy? Like, for example, if you're targeting SDGs that aren't being hit in a banking institution that should be hit in that market, like how do you go about that? But starting.
No, great. And I'm very much an S person when it comes to ESG. So I always love when there's question about the people. So our scorecard does have specific sections about both in terms of bank finances and doesn't finance, so both in terms of exclusion criteria, but also what are the specific social causes that they are particularly focused on. And some of our banks specifically profile themselves on a certain area, I guess it's not explicitly thought from the SDG, but certain areas that particularly cater to certain SDGs. For example, we have some members that are particularly focused on affordable housing in areas where that's really a challenge. Or like I said earlier, really providing finance to the members of the community, which might struggle to have finance from the mainstream banks because they are seen as risky for whatever reason, because of some social profiling or because of their postcode or whatever. So there are certain banks that really explicitly have the focus of serving the people who might struggle to get finance otherwise. And that kind of things across the board are captured in the scorecard, which the members fill in annually. And we do give feedback to the members as well in terms of where they could have room for improvement based on the scorecard responses. We don't specifically kind of expect all banks to kind of cater to all SDGs in their respective markets, but I think there's certain trends that are quite apparent that in certain markets, this is a bit of a generalization, but what I'm hearing from lots of our members in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, for example, that the social challenges and social financing needs are a lot more pressing for them than climate, for example. It's just that people need to have the kind of basic needs met before they can look at kind of saving CO2 emissions. So we also have a bit of spread in our membership in terms of more focus on depending on what's the need in their particular society. So we are not super prescriptive about what they should specifically be doing, but we generally, based on the scorecard, identify areas where they might be lagging the other members or lagging a benchmark, and suggest that they could look at addressing that area. Hope that answers a little bit your question, but yeah, happy to talk more afterwards.
Definitely, I need to learn more about the scorecards benchmarking stuff as well. So definitely gonna reach out. Thank you.
Perfect. Anyone else who wants to put their hand up? I am looking at the chat as well, but if someone wants to read their question out loud, that would also be helpful. So I can take it immediately rather than reading.
I have a question. I'm just wondering how your customers relate to this, and whether that there are certain customers that say, oh, this is great, this is why we want to work with you.
You mean customers as in the bank's
Yes.
clients? Or... Yeah, no, I think that is the case, that many clients are specifically choosing the bank because they actually serve their specific needs, or they understand, or they're specifically profiled to finance to the needs that other banks might seem as risky or not giving enough profits. So there's that for practical reasons, some clients are coming to these banks because there's a good match. But of course, there are many. I'm encouraged to note that there are lots of kind of conscious consumers who specifically want to choose banks if available in their markets, which kind of do use their profits for good causes, or are transparent and aligned with people. So hopefully this trend continues, and people want to make responsible choices also with their money, because I think as all you people in this program know, is often forgotten. People might do lots of recycling and secondhand, but they don't realize that their money can make a lot of difference, both in terms of investments and pensions, but even normal banking, who you choose as your bank. So I think there is a lot of that, but I think there could be a lot more as well. And that's where our efforts to increase this visibility and awareness really come in, because we want people to know about these great opportunities of aligning your money with your values.
Yeah, like that. Pretty cool.
Thanks.
Maybe I could ask you to dig a bit deeper, if it's okay for you. So it would be interesting for consumers to have more sustainable banks. We know for fair trade, for instance, there is a little logo, so it's quite easy to see. But do you do advocacy for consumer? And if so, how do you make it as visible as possible for them to choose the suppliers?
Yeah, this is a great question, because this is my kind of pet project at the moment, to really try and increase the visibility of GABV outside our kind of banking bubble, because I think that's what traditionally, maybe I'm revealing too much here, but I feel like traditionally the GABV discussions and communications have been very much focused in our community and other actors in the banking world. But I think there's so much to be gained for everyone to really raise this understanding and kind of connect the dots and create the networks and connections outside the kind of banking world, not just towards the consumers, which I completely agree. If our member banks have a GABV logo showing that they're a GABV member, I think some people do look for it and understand it, but I would like that to become a lot more like ideally like the fair trade logo, because that would be amazing recognition if people recognize GABV logo to the similar extent. But also banks, shareholders, I think it'd be good for banks financing to also make sure that their shareholders or financiers really value the GABV membership, because that will then again drive other banks into committing these values, because there's kind of a certain standard that if you're going to finance a bank, if you're going to invest in shares in a certain bank, that you want to be in line with their values, that GABV membership is kind of this stamp of approval or verifying that it really does what it says it does. So I'm glad you raised that. There's definitely a lot more to be done on that front in terms of to get the recognition of our brand and alliance more out there. And if anyone has any thoughts on that, I'm very happy to kind of get your suggestions afterwards. Anyone else who wants to squeeze in some last questions? I know we're over time, but I'm fine to stay answering as long as you have. Yeah, Juliet, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I put this question on the chat box. Yeah, so I was asking what strategies do value-driven banks employ to promote financial inclusion and to support marginalized communities in accessing bank services?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's also one area where the regulation is sometimes working against us. There's certain kind of risk expectation or risk limits set by the regulator, which are kind of catering to the mainstream banks, which are all over the place. And sometimes it might be hard for values-based banks to really focus on the marginalized communities because they are kind of categorized as higher risk, and the regulators might not like that. But yeah, like I said earlier, there are lots of our banks that are specifically focusing on this area, mostly because they are based in locations where there is really a gap or need for marginalized communities to get access to finance. So in terms of strategies, I think again that depends on the location and the group that you're trying to reach, and what are the specific needs. But I think often it's about going close to the people, really being present in the communities. I think that's a good strategy to really make sure that you are there to also give people financial advice. So it's not just kind of internet banking, and that might not help people kind of plan their finances and become more financially feasible, but really provide face-to-face banking services in these communities. I think that's, again, it's good for the banks to get that visibility in the communities, but also good for the people to really get access to financial guidance. So I think that would be one. But yeah, I think it depends on the bank and the community. But there's I think microfinance is one typical example. Many of our members are engaged in microfinance, and that's obviously specifically looking at specific needs of the people in different locations. So we have several microfinance institutions among our members, which I think are kind of as close to the marginalized communities as it gets almost. But yeah, I think this I could talk about this all day, but there's also different strategies for different kind of banks and markets and communities that are trying to serve. So but again, this is exactly kind of area that I'm most passionate about. So so hopefully there's more to come in this space from our side as well.
If there aren't other questions from the fellows, I'd love to end us off, Tytti, by asking you if you have any closing advice for our fellows who might be wanting to get into this space, given the different career paths that you've gone through and the experiences that you've had. We talked about this before, about there's many different ways to enter the space, but I think it's hard to know how to start and where some of the resources could be to get going in this space as well.
Yeah, totally. There are a couple of specific resources about open positions within the sustainability that I personally thought were interesting when I was considering changing careers. So I can, yeah, they're very, very concrete, and I can't personally endorse them, but I can say that I found them quite interesting. For example, there's a LinkedIn, it's I think weekly or bi-weekly newsletter, which is called Remote Impact Jobs. So I think the positive about that is also that they are often remote, so they don't require you to relocate, and because it's called impact jobs, they generally are organizations which one way or another are kind of doing sustainable things. So I kind of like the idea of that newsletter, so I wanted to flag that specifically. Generally, I think kind of career spanning thing, I like talking to people, and that's really helped. It helps if you want to kind of find out what others are doing, tell them what you're doing, kind of show to people that you remember them and you're interested in them, because that kind of that network is invaluable. And not only in terms of new job opportunities, but also to kind of keep you handily updated on what other people are doing, because there's so much happening around you and you won't have time to read up on everything. So building the network that works on interesting and good things also helps you stay on top of the recent developments and also be inspired. Maybe that's the most important thing that is so helpful sometimes when you feel this despair about everything going wrong, to see and be reminded that there's so many people doing good things and who are kind of frustrated about the same things and finding solutions as well. So I think it's also a comfort and kind of giving hope in seeing. In my case, I particularly I use LinkedIn a lot and really see in my feed all the things that people from over the years are doing. So I think you can never underestimate the value of networking and connections in different ways, both for kind of for mental health and job opportunities and also knowledge building. And sometimes you might be doing a project where you know someone that, yeah, I'm glad that I know that person because that has expertise on this very niche area that I don't know that well, and I can ask that person. So it's a good opportunity then to reconnect as well. So yeah, speak to people, kind of collect people in your tribe. I've found that to be really personally rewarding, but also helpful for career development.
That's
Otherwise,
great.
I've kind of just randomly stumbled. I didn't have like a preset career plan. It's just worked out really well for me. But also sometimes you need to kind of really think what's important to you as well. Well, I think most of the time you need to think about what's important to you, particularly when you work in sustainability or ESG. I think most of us do this because we believe in it. This is in line with kind of our identity and our personality. And I think it's also important to take care of your mental health, because when you are so passionate and you want to see the good in the world and it doesn't always work out, you can, the usual thing like put on your own mask before helping others. So I would really encourage everyone to make sure that you don't burn out or you don't give your everything without looking after yourself as well. And yet you seek opportunities that are really enabling you to be you. And be true to your values to really hopefully mitigate getting on the wrong frustrating paths.
That's really great advice, Tytti. Thank you so much for coming and spending time with us and sharing these resources and the presentation. Really appreciate that. And then encouraging to really drive that impact focused values that the GABV is doing, as well as you in your own career. So grateful for this conversation. Thank you so much. Let's give Tytti a round of applause and have a great evening. You all have a good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. And yeah, take care.
Thanks everyone. I know.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.